It's that time again. We should do this more than just once a year, but generally when I reach out to my friend Mike Ferrin, he goes, and you are? But Mike Ferrin has joined me to preview baseball 2025. I am still a diehard baseball fan. I love the game, summer, America, baseball, all of that. But I don't know that anybody loves it as much as you do.
Well, Sven Kortmas, it's always a pleasure to be with you, first of all. So just, I, you know, like,
You got my name right.
yeah, it is. It took a challenge. I haven't read it's written down here somewhere. My handwriting's not very good. Um, I love baseball more than you. I don't know. I mean, I think at this point, it's more like an obsession than anything, which I think is probably like a step above love, and then and that becomes problematic, right? Because like if you've ever seen a Glenn Close movie, you know it's not going to
Yeah.
end well.
Yeah. Well, and I think we all remember the end of the Glenn Close movie you're referencing, where a bunch of former White Sox managers stood up in the tub after we thought they were dead. Remember
Yes,
that?
that's exactly what it was. Yeah, it was like, oh my god, what had happened to Bruce Kim? No, wait, I guess he was on the Cubs. So third base coach.
So let's start with Chicago. But before we do that, let's start with a topic that maybe I'm the only one. I worry about baseball because the baseball I grew up with doesn't seem to exist anymore. And spoiled kids aren't playing enough of it. I don't see kids as much on little league fields anymore. I mean, hockey blew
Yeah,
up here. The Blackhawks have done a nice job of making sure that's tamped down again, and there's no interest. Soccer continues to threaten to get hold now in its 50th year of being the next great sport. Is baseball in trouble anyway with the next generation?
you know what's interesting is that the youth participation numbers have actually been increasing over the last 4 or 5 years, which is really positive. I think since
Is it
2020 in
regional?
particular. I don't know if it's regional or not. That I don't have good data on. What I can tell you is that more people are getting involved now. You know, this is just like when MLB talks about its TV ratings, and they're like, "Hey, we saw big increases in 18 to 34." Well, the numbers had gotten fairly low, right? So you're seeing increase. I think there are a couple of factors in, and I think that it's there are a couple things that stand out, right? So like for on the positive for baseball is that I'm not sure that every parent loves their kid playing football anymore because they've seen the risk of concussions and injuries, and so they give them more opportunities. I do think that there are more grassroots leagues. I think MLB has made an effort to try and create better programs and opportunities for kids in underserviced areas. And so I think baseball has grown in that area. But from the youth side, really, it's very expensive. It is much more similar to youth hockey in terms of the
All
amount
right.
of financial commitment that goes into it, because a lot of what's being done is travel ball, right? And even if you have a good travel ball team with a player that maybe doesn't have financial resources where they can give scholarships, for the most part, you know, parents are footing the bill for it. I don't think baseball's unique in that, right? So, like, I have friends that have kids that are involved in volleyball. I have, you know, nieces and nephews that have done that with basketball. Like, all of the sports, youth sports is big business now, and I also think that the difference from when we were kids, and my generation and Generation X was probably the last generation to deal with this, was like we had more free time to play. I think kids have more structured play now, or structured activities. And I think that takes away from some of the ability to just go out in the backyard and, you know, hit the ball with some buddies and stuff like that.
But the other part of this was, and you had this growing up in Chicago as well. You're a little kid and you take a ball and you throw it against the wall. You take a tennis ball, throw it
Yeah.
against the wall, unless your dad was a drinker. And then he could throw an actual baseball against the wall. And by the time he sobered up, you could claim it was something else that did the damage. Oh, was I talking about me
That
there?
doesn't sound like something from experience at all.
Was that me? Um, but you could always be, I mean, this
Yeah.
is how old I am. I was the tallest kid. So in the early 70s, I'm 10 years old, and I was Boog Powell, okay,
Uh,
Baltimore Orioles first baseman,
yeah.
right? So you could always be that guy, or you could be Brooks Robinson back in the day, or whatever. And generationally, it goes on like that. The game has such a Hispanic influence now, and this is the furthest thing from being racist or anything else. We're talking about just the truth of how these things progress. The LPGA has a problem with so many great Korean stars. There aren't a lot of American stars. Do kids have players they identify with in the same way that I
Yeah,
did when I was a kid, or you might?
yeah. I mean, I think, and the MLB just released their statistics. I think yesterday that it's 26% international players, right?
Okay.
So on opening day rosters. So that's, you figure that's what, 26 guys on 30 teams. And you'll have to help me with the math because baseball's not a very big math sport. And so I'm not very good at it. But let's
No,
say it's
the
about,
numbers don't matter.
let's say it's like roughly 700 players, right? About 100 of them are from the Dominican Republic. So like there's a wide swath of players that are from there. But the vast majority are white Americans, I think. And I think, one of the things that that's been troublesome to the league, just as an aside, because the number of African American players has been on a fairly steady decline, at least at the major league level. I think we've seen, in part, I think, because of some of what we talked about, right? There weren't many opportunities. MLB is really focused on that. I do think that the cost in some areas can be an issue. But I do think we are seeing more Black players in the minor leagues, and hopefully that leads to a more diverse major league roster. I just don't think that I think the problem has probably been more on that most domestic players still play the game in a way that's kind of like 1978ish, in that there's no outward joy to it, right? Like it's this very staid process. And this is not entirely, I mean, again, I don't want to, this is the problem with stereotypes, right? As you pass with you try and paint with a broad brush. And so this isn't for every player, but I do think that there has been, there just hasn't been a way for players to express themselves previously. I think you're starting to see more of it. I think you see, just like there are divides in just about everything in the country. I think there are divides in style, but I think there's plenty of American players to be able to look up to, regardless of race, and it's still a huge portion. I mean, the vast majority of the players that are there. So I'm not sure that I buy that that's the reason why. I think the access to the sport, and I think the amount of financial the amount of money that it takes really to play it at the amateur level, to play it at a high amateur level, is significant now. But some of the stuff that could be good that's changing is that, like, once the House settlement comes about in college sports, which I'm sure you've talked maybe a little bit about, this is the whole aftermath of the NIL, is like baseball is going to expand the number of scholarship opportunities here, and teams are going to be able to carry 34 scholarships. Right now they're at 11.7. That's going to give more opportunities for kids to potentially go to college and play sports, which I think is a real positive, and hopefully that leads to growth of the sport.
And speaking of that, you're one of the main college baseball guys in the country now. You're a great play-by-play guy. You're a great baseball guy. We'll get to the rest of your plugs later. But one of the things you do,
No,
we're
it's
talking to you
natural.
from,
It's not plugs. That's actually real. That's
I'm sensitive about the hair. But you're in Virginia now for some ACC baseball,
yeah.
and you can see Mike Ferrin on ESPN doing at least 30 games this season. Are you seeing the same sort of split as far as demographics go in college baseball prior to that settlement you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have seen is, I mean, first of all, it's largely American. I mean, I would say probably 90+% are domestic players. The part of that is because the international amateur system is significantly different, where especially players from Latin America that are not from Puerto Rico can sign at the age of 16, right? And there's not a draft there, but there are limitations on free agency. It's nothing about baseball is ever easy when it comes to a signing system, right? But I think what you're seeing is more growth in terms of the popularity of the sport, for sure. And then there's some interesting stories. Like, so as you mentioned, I'm here for Stanford, Virginia. When we're taping this on Thursday night, we had Stanford's first like linear TV game with Rintaro Sasaki, who I'm not sure if you've heard of, but he is the most prominent Japanese prep player to ever come and play college baseball in the States. And he decided that he would have been the number one pick in the NPB draft. He is the all-time prep home run leader in Japan. His dad is a coach who coached Shohei Ohtani and Yusei Kikuchi. and he decided that he wanted to come to the U.S. for an education and as a way to get into the
Wow.
U.S. System of playing, because it's far different in Japan. It's 9 years for free agency, and if you get drafted by an NPB team, then there's you might have a posting system like we just saw with Roki Sasaki or with several others. So he's here and he's playing, and I think it's a really cool story because I think it speaks to the growth of baseball internationally. White Sox have a pretty decent little hitting prospect named Rico Nishida, who is Japanese, who played his college ball at Oregon. So like there are some changes that are happening to it. I think you're starting to see a little bit more diverse pipeline in terms of where players come from, but it's still predominantly American-born players that are a part of it, or if not American-born, players that grew up in the U.S.
When is your next game on ESPN?
It is Saturday afternoon on ESPN2. I don't know what time. I think it's at noon Central. Yeah, Stanford.
Everyone should watch all this nonsense about March Madness. Screw that. Watch baseball.
It's more fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about the bigs, and let's take it back to Chicago, where I said we would start. The general manager of the Chicago White Sox, probably a nice guy. I don't know him, Chris Getz. And he did an interview the other day. And at the end of the interview, he said, I guarantee you we'll win more games than we did last year.
I would agree with him. I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, I don't see that selling a lot of tickets when you won 41 games last year. How bad is this team?
Well, they're not good, Steve. I think that's. I think I saw the latest.
Are we talking
projection.
Pull the plug bad?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the latest Fangraphs projection for them for their projection systems had them winning 52 games, which would be a 11 game improvement over last year.
25% improvement. Yeah, a little more than that.
The count is half full. So I don't think they're good, but I think the thing is that they have some interesting young players already. Sean Burke looked awfully good on opening day. I mean, I think that's a really encouraging sign. He's a unique arm. I think they have 3 or 4 players that are opening the year in AAA. Colson Montgomery, the shortstop, the 2 catchers, and Kyle Teal, who they got in the Crochet trade. Edgar Quiroz, they got a couple years ago in a trade at the Angels. Chase Mydroth, who was also part of that Crochet deal. They're in AAA, and my guess is that they will be up relatively soon to the big leagues because they're a big part of the future potentially for the White Sox. The 2 top left-handed pitching prospects in baseball are in the White Sox organization, and they're both going to pitch at AA to open the year. So Hagen Smith, who was their first rounder last year out of Arkansas, and Noah Schultz, who's from Oswego, is maybe the best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball. And those guys are going to be in AA along with Grant Taylor, who I think is a really intriguing guy. So it's, yes, at the major league level, it's not what you want for sure, as Joe Girardi would say, but it's going to get better. And I do think from an infrastructure standpoint, things have improved significantly. James Fegan, who I'm sure you probably know, who used to write for The Athletic and now writes for Sox Machine, what for my money is the best White Sox beat writer, had a really telling piece on just how far behind the White Sox were in terms of what kind of information and technology they had to help their young players improve. And so a lot of what's been done behind the scenes has been getting personnel and the right equipment in to be able to try and modernize the operation, right? And that's something that's not going to show up in the wins and losses now.
And modernizing the operation with an owner who I think you and I both like, Jerry Reinsdorf, who's 114 years old.
Right.
And notorious for not firing people who should be fired.
Yeah.
Has Jerry held the organization back because of that?
I think it's his greatest strength and probably his biggest weakness is his loyalty to people. You know what I mean? I think it's a really admirable quality. And I think to your point, I think Jerry's a really nice man. Like in my interactions with him, he's always been very, very nice. And I don't have that many with him, but I do think that probably had slowed some. I think he probably did not. He probably was not quite aware of how to take the organization the next step forward or help them take the next step forward. I mean, they kind of got off to that start under Rick Hahn, right? They went through the rebuild. They got a lot of players. The decision to hire Tony La Russa was a little bit strange. I know that was driven by ownership. And I wonder if, they had hired, say, AJ Hinch instead, if we would even be having a conversation like this about the White Sox. But a lot of it is the personnel that you have to bring in. And I think just from this, listen, I was super skeptical of them hiring Chris Getz because I felt like it was one of those things where it wasn't going to change. Knowing the people that Getz has put around him, knowing how he has taken a look at the organization, talking to people from outside the organization who know him, kind of believe in him, I think it's moving in a much better direction. Now it's just a matter of whether or not they can continue to invest in what they have to behind the scenes to get the most out of it. Because he's got some really smart people that he's brought in, not the least of which is his manager, who's a pretty sharp dude.
Yeah, and is there a reason he took the job?
Well, there's only 30 of them.
I know, but I thought he'd get a few offers here and there. Not that there'd be a huge argument over hiring him.
Yeah, I mean, he had pulled Will Venable had pulled his name out of the mix the year before, and I think there was this feeling that, well, he's going to be the next guy in waiting for Bruce Bochy. But I don't know if Boch is going to retire. I mean, his contract's up after this year.
All he does is win.
Yeah, I mean, every other year, right? He wins. So I mean, he's got 4 World Series championships. So I think it probably was, there was an opportunity. There's a connection with some people that were in that front office. I think he felt like there was the right kind of path. And I think as a young manager coming in, getting an opportunity to be on a team that's growing, like nobody's going to care really what the White Sox record is this year. And there's a much better chance to screw up, I think, because every manager is going to make mistakes, right? Especially first-time managers, right? And doing that outside the limelight, I think, is important. I think if you were to talk to Brandon Hyde, who's the Orioles manager, who worked in the Cubs organization for a long time, if you were to talk to Brandon Hyde about that, who went through something similar with Baltimore, he would tell you that it was probably valuable for him in that as much as they're developing players, he needed to develop his managerial style too. And he's got a team that's competing for the postseason. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. Plus Venable's got, he was with the Cubs organization. He knows Chicago a little bit. I think he's like, he brings a different energy and a real intelligence level to the clubhouse that I think is admirable. And if you spend any time with Will, like he's a really personable dude. Like he doesn't strike you as the guy that went to Princeton. You know what I mean? Like, but he went to Princeton.
Is there any reason to believe that the White Sox to Nashville rumor will pop up again?
No.
If there's another 50-win season?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think all of this is kind of the ugly side of leverage plays, right? So the Sox want a new stadium. They want somebody else to pay for a chunk of it. The state doesn't want to pay for a chunk of it.
Yeah, and I like Jerry Reinsdorf a lot. You couldn't have less leverage right now with a guy who doesn't want to spend money on sports the way the governor here doesn't, Pritzker. And you have a bad team. You're not getting a new stadium in Chicago.
I mean, I think even if he had a good team, he wasn't going to get that. Now, the question is, can you get private investment? Because I do think that neighborhood that they've selected to potentially build one, I mean, that's got a chance to be a really beautiful spot. And you can have the view of the skyline, like it's a good location, like all of that. So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of getting that all figured out. But here's the thing is the Nashville thing never had legs because Major League Baseball views Nashville as a viable city for expansion. It doesn't mean that it's going to be, but it's a viable city for expansion. And what that means is that they think that they can get somebody on the hook who'll spend $2 billion for a franchise in the next 5 years. So like the A's moving to Vegas via Sacramento, right? The league didn't view Vegas as an expansion city, but they would let somebody move there if they could craft their deal, right? What's going to happen with the Rays, although the commissioner has been pretty adamant that the Rays are going to stay in the Tampa seat, Pete, that's the market that they're going to be in. When they were playing around with that idea of splitting the season with, St. Pete and Montreal, the reason why they were considering Montreal in that is because the league said it was okay because they didn't view them as a viable expansion city. So when you've got those places where they think they can get $2 billion because there's enough business people and the city's growing enough and all of that, you're not going to get a chance to move there. So I think those are all parts of it. I think the fact that you have Justin Ishbia, buying up minority ownership stakes. He lives in Chicago. His brother's a control person for the Phoenix Suns because everybody ends up retiring to Phoenix from Chicago anyway. But so like they have like I think they're on a path to where at some point Justin Ishbia will own the team. My guess is it'll be sometime after one of two things happens: either Jerry Reinsdorf passes away, or they get a stadium deal finalized, and Ishbia's got enough money that he could, like he's like Scrooge McDuck. He trips over piles of cash. He would be one
Well,
of
it's
the
funny
wealthiest
too,
owners of
because you
baseball.
sort of have to have that attitude that I have a lot of money and I can afford to see a lot of it not make money for a while,
Yeah.
because people don't understand how expensive it is to run a major league franchise. This is not the NFL where you have profit margins, sleeping with each other to create more profit margins. It's tougher to make money in baseball. 162 games and all of that. And when you have a fan base, a loyal fan base of 8 to 10,000, I don't know how you get more people out to a park that people bitch about. It's a tough business right now.
Well, for them, I mean, certainly they have been one of the teams that has lost the most money, but I mean, we're still talking about a $12 billion industry. And, I think one of the things that has changed over the last 40 years, and I think it probably happened about the time that Peter Uberoff became commissioner, was that owners started to become more concerned about the bottom line and less concerned about owning a toy, right? Like I personally, if I were that wealthy, it'd be swell. As my dad
Mm-hmm.
says, the money may not buy happiness, but I still haven't found an appropriate substitute. There's this chance that if you were to own a team or I were to own a team, I wouldn't really care about what the profits were on it, much like I wouldn't care about how much money my boat was making because it's a hobby. And I think what's happened is, or what tends to happen
What?
overall, is teams, owners win. I think you can see this a little bit with the Cubs, right? Spent a lot of their own money. They won a World Series championship. They haven't gotten back, and they're kind of like, yeah, well, we can compete for a playoff spot, but maybe we don't dip into our own pockets as much. And I think some of that just comes with the amount of time that you own a team. And we have a number of owners that have owned for 20 plus years now. And so I think that's part of what shifts and changes as well, is that, they're treating them like they're standalone businesses as opposed to treating them like they're hobbies, like they're, like they have some sort of, like Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, who might not be a great example in this because he's putting his own money into the Mets team, is an art collector, right? And so like that'll appreciate over time. Well, so will the ownership of the Mets, right? And most of these guys, like what Jerry Reinsdorf paid for the White Sox, for example, and what he could sell it for now is a pretty sizable difference. It's in the billions of
Sure.
dollars.
So high water mark and wins for these White Sox. I'm going to go total homer here. And I'm going to say they're going to have strong second half, but they will heartbreak and they will have another stink of a 3-digit loss total.
Yeah.
I've got them at 61 and 101.
It's about right, I think. I mean, I think 99 losses would be a really good season for them. That would be a 22
All right,
game
I'm going to make them
improvement, right?
63 and 99 for you.
I mean, I think it's not necessarily going to be easy, but I do think that they have some young players coming, and at least like going into next year, things will feel a little different than they do right now. First 2 months have a chance. Like if you told me right now they're going to be 10 and 30 a quarter of the way through the season, I'd be like, nope, I'd see that. But I think it'll get
What
better.
about these Chicago Cubs? They went out and they spent a truckload of money on Kyle Tucker. They get him for a year. They probably not more than that. Are they ready to compete again, or are they still going to need a lot of luck?
Well, I mean, I would say that they actually got a pretty good bargain on Tucker for as good a player as he is. I mean, now they cost them a good prospect in Cam Smith, who stunningly opened as the right fielder for the Astros. I don't think anybody saw that coming, that he would go at 32 games in the minor leagues and be a big league everyday outfielder. And we'll see whether or not they give him enough rope that he can go through some of the fits and starts young players do. I do think the Cubs are better. I think the Ryan Presley acquisition was important. I think they stabilized the back of their rotation. Rotation's a little thin and inexperienced, and they don't really miss a lot of bats. The bullpen looks like it should be better. I think some of the guys that they had that came up last year in addition to Presley, will make that a better group. I really like Porter Hodge quite a bit. The offense was just kind of mid last year, and everybody loved the to talk about how the wind blowing in at Wrigley had a huge effect on it, right? Which I mean it can from time to time, but the back third of the lineup has a fair amount of question marks to it. Like Miguel Amaya had a huge domestic opener, 5 RBIs with a couple of doubles, and had a really nice second half, and so maybe he can build on that. I know Cub fans are excited about Matt Shaw, who I think has got a chance to be a pretty solid player. And Pete Crow Armstrong's second half was certainly encouraging. If they can build a decent enough offense, there's nothing that says that they can't win that division. Remember, they weren't that far out of the playoffs the last 2 years either. Like last year it was half a dozen games. The year before they missed by a single game. Losing 6 out of 7 to the Diamondbacks in September put the Diamondbacks on the path to win the pennant and set the Cubs at home. The Cubs win 2 more of those games, basically split, or come close to splitting those 7 games. And the Cubs are the ones that are playing for that chance. And who knows how that plays out. So I don't think they're a great team.
They had a bad September last year as well.
Yeah.
So they got to actually finish.
Yeah. They're not a bad team, but they're not a great team. And that kind of fits with everybody else that's in the National League Central.
Yeah. And the American League Central is not exactly Cooperstown either.
Well, they had 3 playoff teams last year. I mean, and I do think Minnesota is pretty good. Like those teams.
I think Minnesota wins the division.
I do too. But I think we're in the minority in that because I think everybody is concerned. They have the most star power for sure. It's just a matter of whether or not they can keep their guys on the field. But the Centrals should be 9 of the 10 teams in the Central divisions, I think legitimately have a chance to win the division. The only one that really doesn't is the White Sox.
The Milwaukee Brewers go to camp in a regular season without Bob Uecker for the first time in forever. They'll celebrate Ueck all year long. He is truly one of the funniest people I had ever seen before I got to know him a little bit, and he didn't let me down there either. And it's just going to be weird not hearing him do baseball. But I'm trying to think. All the great voices, all the great classic baseball announcers, radio trained baseball announcers, maybe they end up doing TV, whatever the case. Are there any left? I don't think there are.
Let me think. I mean, well, first of all, a listener pointed this out to me today that this was the first opening day in 75 years that neither Vin Scully nor Bob Uecker was involved in.
How about that?
Is that incredible to think about?
That's unbelievable.
I mean, I think listen, there are some great broadcasters still. I mean, Tom Hamilton just went to the Hall of Fame or is going to the Hall of Fame.
I think there's tremendous broadcasters, and I include you amongst them. But I'm talking about those guys that were just identified with baseball and those great names. They're all gone. And it's part of living, right?
It's part of living, yeah. I mean, there are fewer octogenarians now that are doing it. I mean, John Sterling stepped away last year too. So like probably the most recognizable, at least from when, our generation of watching sports in terms of like name recognition as an announcer is probably Dave Sims, who we know more as a basketball announcer before the last, 20 years that he's been in baseball, doing the Mariners and now doing the Yankees on radio. And Dave's the best, man. Like, what a great dude on top of it. So, and he loves baseball. So like there's just, you're right that it's a little bit of a transition in that regard, but there are still some of those legacy announcers like Eric Nadel in Texas, who's, a Hall of Famer. He, is still going, and there are plenty of guys that still have the job. Pat, I mean, like Pat is now one of those guys. Pat Hughes has been at it for 40 years, like, and think about how long he has done the Cubs on radio. I think it has to be the record or approaching what Brickhouse did at the very least in terms of the years that he's done Cubs radio. So I think it kind of snuck up on us what that generation's like now. You know what I mean?
And I like the Brewers in the National League.
I do too.
What about you?
I do too. I just think that they've made the postseason 6 of the last 7 years, despite the fact they're in the smallest market in baseball. Like they're just incredibly well run. Pat Murphy is a one of a kind manager. He is a character beyond a character. And they have really good players. Like they have Jackson Churio is going to be a superstar, and I think they will. I think it's them and the Cubs and maybe the Reds at the top of that division. But I like Milwaukee just because I think if any team deserves the benefit of the doubt in Major League Baseball, it's the Brewers.
NL East, you go out and you're the Mets and you spend all the money you have, and then you borrow some from the hot dog guy downtown who just changed the water, and you get Soto. And Juan Soto, he's great.
Yeah.
He's great. He could well be one of the all-time greats by the time he's done. He's not going to change that entire roster or whatever weird luck the Mets have had or hadn't had recently. And every preview I've seen about the National League East names the Braves are right there with him. It's got to make the Mets ownership crazy.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, the Mets fans are sitting around going, $16 for hot dog water. What are we doing here, right? Listen, I think the Mets are good. Like they made the league championship series last year, right? With a team that probably didn't have any business doing it. And I think if people are down on the Mets a little bit right now, it's because they have a couple of key injuries, not the least of which is their outstanding catcher, Francisco Alvarez, who's going to miss a couple months. And they have Joe Manaya, who was their best pitcher last year, who's out for a couple months. Clay Holmes was a reliever for the Yankees last year, who started for them, the Mets on opening day now, right? They signed him as a starter this winter. So I think that's where some of it is. But the Mets should have one of the best offenses in the National League. And with Soto and Francisco Lindor, they have two legit superstars in the middle. Pete Alonso, who is one of the more famous Mets, is probably their third or fourth best offensive player. So think about that. Like, that's a really good team. For me, I mean, that division at the top of it is really tough. The Phillies are a little bit older, but they have the best rotation in the National League. And I think Zach Wheeler is the best pitcher alive who hasn't won a Cy Young award. He's been really close. He's still a dominant force at the top of their rotation. They have a really talented star-studded lineup, not the least of which is Bryce Harper, who is a perennial MVP candidate still into his early 30s. And then, as to your point with Atlanta, like, that's a team that had a bad offensive year last year because a lot of their guys were hurt. Well, Spencer Strider is actually on a rehab assignment tonight, and should be back. I think they're thinking 3 starts, and he'll be back into the rotation, which will be huge for them. Ronald Acuna Jr. could rejoin them by the end of the month, and they are an immensely talented club. So I don't know that it has as much to do with the Mets or Braves specifically as it does just kind of like the way that lays out. But you have to remember, like, on paper, the 3 best teams to me in the National League are the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Diamondbacks. And like, the Braves, I think, have a very, very good case to be the second best.
Yeah, I got Mets in the East. How about you?
Braves. I'm buying what the Braves are selling.
I knew we'd have a terrible fight about something. Out in the National League West, the Diamondbacks have done it quite a bit cheaper than the Dodgers. You could
Diamondbacks payroll is higher than the Cubs. Did you know that?
Is that right?
Yeah. Diamondbacks payroll is over $200 million.
And the Dodgers are north of 350.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like a rounding error.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's accounting. Are the Dodgers 110 wins?
It's really hard for the quantitative analysis part of my life to say that anybody's 110 wins. I think they're really good. Yeah, I mean, well, listen, like, 116 is a record, right? The Dodgers won 111 games a couple of years ago, right? And then lost in the division series. So, yeah, I mean, I can see them winning well over 100 games. I think their division is, like, they benefit from not playing as many games in their division, because I think the Diamondbacks are good. I think the Padres are still a pretty good team. I think the Giants are okay. But I think they're going to win 100 games. I think that's easy. They'll be the number 1 seed in the National League playoffs. It's just a matter of what happens once they get to the division series, because that's the beauty of baseball's postseason. I don't know if I've shared this one with you, but there was a study that was done 5 or 6 years ago by an analyst named Ben Baumer, who found that if, in the NBA, 80% of the favorites win the series, right? For that to happen in football, every round would have to be like a best of 15. In the NHL, it'd have to be a best of 41. In baseball, every round would have to be a best of 75 to have the favorite win 80% of the time. And if you think about it, like, think how few times, like, the first 2 years of this playoff format, everybody was screaming, oh, the bye is terrible. The bye is terrible, right? And then the top seeds both went to the World Series last year. There's just far more randomness in baseball. Baseball, the best teams show up over the course of 6 months. Anything can happen in a short series. And, it quite frequently, the worst team beats the best team 2 out of 3. So, listen, I think the Dodgers are going to be in the playoffs. I think they can print playoff tickets now. As to what happens come October, like I'm not smart enough to be able to predict that.
Let's go to the AL East, where the Yankees have to wonder if the Sopranos will put a hit on their pitching staff as more and more pitchers fall. You know, the trouble with the guys in Jersey. The Yankees and the Red Sox, the Yankees and the Red Sox, the Yankees and the Red Sox. I don't think there's anybody more entertaining than Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but
Yeah.
nobody talks about the Blue Jays. Who's going to win the AL East?
I picked Baltimore there, but I think all five teams have a case to be made. Tampa Bay's offense is a concern for me. Their pitching is really good, but I don't think that they can score enough runs. I think Baltimore is a very good young offensive team with okay pitching. The Jays are interesting because I think they're a little bit better than people realize. They actually had a very good winter, despite the fact that they didn't land, a big fish like Roki Sasaki or Juan Soto. They definitely improved that roster. I think they're a decent team. I think the Yankees, despite the injuries, are still pretty good. I mean, they do have Aaron Judge, and that guy's, he's not physically, he looks like an aircraft carrier, but he's the kind of guy that can carry an entire offense for a season. We've seen him do it before. And the Red Sox are a better team than they were. So, it wouldn't surprise me to see that division. I think most of the projections have them like first to last, the different 6 to 8 games. And that sounds about right. Like I picked the Orioles, but I would not say I'm particularly convicted in it. And I think that's the case with just about every American League division, is that they're pretty well up for grabs.
I like your Orioles pick as well, but just to be the contrarian, I'm going to go with the Red Sox.
I think that's a popular choice, and I think there's a lot to like about what they did in acquiring Garrett Crochet, and they have a ton of really good high end position player prospects that are going to help. And Alex Bregman, from what I understand, has already changed the culture of that organization. I mean, he is a difference maker off the field.
And out west in the AL, I don't pay much attention to the American League West, and I certainly should. I'll talk to myself about that later when I'm alone in my room. But
and you sit there and you think about the fact that you don't think about the American League West.
Yeah, that's odd, isn't it? That means I got to get out and get some air. Well, the golf course opened today, so maybe I can do that. But the AL West, who do you like?
Can I pass to Arlene on that one? Or what? Listen, I think it's been the Astros division, right, for a long time. And because of the Tucker trade, because of the Presley trade, because of losing Bregman, I think there's far more uncertainty with Houston than there has been. The Rangers should have the best offense in the American League. On paper, it certainly looks like it. And they have, at least to open the season, a healthy Jacob deGrom, who is really good. I mean, I think he proved in his 3 starts at the end of last year, coming back from Tommy John surgery, that when he pitches, he's still the best pitcher on the planet. So they have some major bullpen questions. I like Texas in the division. Again, not one that I'm very convicted on. I am really curious to see what Houston looks like, especially with, Isaac Paredes at third and, what Canton Smith is able to do in right field. I'm very, very curious to see what that's like, because he got there so fast. And I think those of us who follow the draft would not have expected him to be the first position player to make it to the big leagues from that class. And then I think Seattle, like their offense was terrible last year. Well, terrible for most of the year. They kind of finished middle of the pack actually in runs scored, but they weren't a real consistent offense. And they need just a little bit, because their pitching is going to be excellent. And that's not just a product of the ballpark. They just have outstanding pitching. They have some very good high-end position player prospects. I think they're going to help out at some point over the course of this season, but I think they probably still fall a little short overall. The A's should be fun. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but I think they're going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and the Rangers could make a bit of a run in the playoffs, because once you get into the playoffs, I don't know if you know this, it's like starting the season over. Nothing matters.
Well, remember that team, they lost the division on the second to last day of the season.
Yeah.
In 2023, and then or on the last day of the season, and then had to fly all the way across the country for the wild card round against Tampa. And everybody was like, boy, they're toast. And what do? They went on to win the pennant and win the World Series, right? So they're and their lineup, like Corey Seager is a monster, and Wyatt Langford is going to be an MVP candidate at some point in his career, and it might happen this year.
Everybody assumes the Dodgers will come out of the National League. There's no reason not to. That's probably your safest bet. Who's not? Who are they not thinking about? Like, if it's not the Dodgers in the National League, who is it?
I mean, I think Braves are a good choice. I think the Phillies are a good choice. I think Arizona's a good choice. I think those would be the ones that I would look at.
And I don't know who's going to win the American League.
I don't either. I mean, I really don't. Like, I begrudgingly, we had to do picks and as a channel, and I emailed my boss and I was like, I don't feel good about 3/4 of these, which is like terrifying when you're making predictions, but as a fan is freaking great, right? Because
Yeah,
it means
makes
that
for a great season.
it makes for an exciting season. So I picked the Red Sox. I think we had 6 different American League teams in our staff of 20 that were
Wow,
picked to win the pennant in the American League.
that's amazing. Two players or two other questions before I let you go. Paul Skeens of the Pirates. How good is he?
Really good.
Does he disappear because he's in Pittsburgh, or is he going to be a star everybody's talking about?
I think he's transcendent in terms of talent. Like, I think he just like he is like he's must watch. He's so good. You know, was fortunate to see him play in college. And I think the other thing is that, like, the more you get to know the Paul Skeens story, the more people are going to resonate to him. You know, he was at the Air Force Academy for a couple of years. He is a really dedicated human to people, and to, like, he was there to serve. Like, that's what he wanted to do. I think he kind of had to be talked into, like, hey, listen, your baseball career is really going to take off. So I think he's going to be one of the most recognizable stars in baseball going forward. He's a really, really special pitcher, and I think he's a big reason why Pittsburgh has a chance.
The St. Louis Cardinals. That's a city that was always the best baseball city in America,
Mm-hmm.
arguably, but I would argue it was. They have not been consistently competitive now for years. How do they fix that?
Well, it's a good question. This winter, they made the decision that their longtime president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak, is going to step away when his contract is up. But they have hired his replacement in waiting. He's been in the organization for a year already, and Chaim Bloom, who used to run the Red Sox. And so Mozeliak's job is to handle the major league staff, while Bloom, much like we were talking about with the White Sox, improves the infrastructure and player development for the Cardinals and does a lot of hiring. Now, the problem is that the Cardinals had a couple of stated goals. One was to cut payroll back, and the other was to create more opportunities for their young players. So they literally had one job this winter, which was to trade Nolan Arenado. And guess who their starting third baseman was on opening day? So they've gone from saying that they were going into a reset to going into a transition. These are all, like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but baseball executives have started to choose terms that are more associated with young adult novels and dime store paperbacks than they are like the reimagination, the reawakening, the, like, all of this stuff. The only thing that's missing is some dude with long flowing hair and a horse. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what their path is for another year, because they basically have two bosses who are doing two different things. And I would think that the path will become a lot clearer after this year. That said, I don't actually think they're a bad team. I mean, they won 82 games last year after being miserable for a good chunk of the summer. I think there's some talent there. I don't think that they'll end up making the postseason, but I don't think that they're going to be a team that's going to lose 90 games either. So it's a really weird place where the Cardinals are stuck in the middle. And I mean, they will get out of it. I'm confident that they will get out of it, but I just don't know that this is going to be the year. And I'm interested to see what happens when Chaim Bloom takes over. He's a very smart guy.
Every movie Slapshot.
Oh, I watch it every morning in the winter as my show prep.
As much as I'm excited about another baseball season, um, I am concerned because I love the White Sox. I love, I mean, look, I love the Cubs, but I love the White Sox as well. I'm just concerned at some point Paul Newman will appear as a ghost, come back, and he will trade Luis Robert for a soda machine because they need soda. I know I'm combining a couple of things here. I
Yes.
got a little bit of a Brad Pitt movie in here and a little bit of that, but you know where I'm going. Luis Robert is really all the White Sox have to hope for, and he'll be gone by September.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think he'll be gone by the middle of July. He said the other day, I'm surprised that I'm still there. That's pretty good. So he will be out the door real soon. But hopefully things will go a little bit better than they did for the Charlestown Chiefs, which you may
Let's see if we
remember
can come up
they folded that.
with a White Sox slogan for the year. Come for the visitors, stay for the. No, I don't. I've got
Milkshakes,
nothing. I got
milkshakes. They
nothing.
love their milkshakes there. In reality, like I actually love going to the Raid. I think the ballpark gets a bad rap. I think once they fixed it
I've
25
always
years
felt that way.
ago, like
Yeah.
when they put that roof on it, it changed the complexion of it. It's got great sight lines, and it has like Milwaukee wishes it had the collection of encased meats that they serve at the Raid. Like I think the food's fantastic. I actually love going to games there. It's a terrific. I like the food by itself, and nobody tailgates like White Sox fans. Like Sox fans
True.
tailgates are where it's at.
They have a
Like,
party.
yeah.
Maybe that's the slogan. Come for dinner, stay for baseball. Right? That could be it.
It's like dinner and a show, right? It's like
Yes.
this is like the White Sox. We're not exactly pump boys and dinettes.
You're the best, Mike Ferrin. When are you on the Sirius XM radio network?
Let's see, 9 a.m. to noon on MLB Network Radio Central Time every day, and then various
And what
sporting
channel is that?
events around. Sirius XM channel 89.
And see you doing college baseball on ESPN2 all summer.
Yeah, ESPN2, ACC
Well,
network
through the World
yeah,
Series.
throughout that. I'll be doing it through super regionals, and I'll pop around. I'll do some filling for the Diamondbacks and some other stuff. I'm like a bad penny, Steve. I never actually go away.
Good to see you off the streets, man. That's all. My
Passed
Chicago
around from
pal
man to man.
forever. It's the great Mike Ferrin. Follow you where on social?
Let's see. You can follow me at Mike_Ferrin on Twitter and something similar on Blue Sky. I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it's
fine.
at Mike Ferrin, something like that.
Do a little work, people. Google it.
Yeah.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Anytime, but take care.